lights strobed across my driveway from a golf cart bristling with plastic sirens that looked like they'd been ordered from a Halloween clearance sale. A man in a nylon vest that barely covered his considerable midsection screamed with an authoritative tone that cracked halfway through, "HOA Tactical. Comply immediately with Neighborhood Ordinance 7.3. Then he swept my legs with a collapsible baton, and I heard the crisp celery snap of my fibula echoing through the quiet suburban evening. The pain shot through my body like lightning finding ground. Before I could breathe again or process what had just happened, my front door opened and my wife, Lieutenant Mara Pike, U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6, stepped out in her favorite pajama pants covered in cartoon penguins and a messy ponytail. She blinked once at the tactical unit of dad-bods wearing Amazon badges and sporting utility belts loaded with zip ties and citation pads, and then dismantled them like IKEA furniture with half the screws missing and no instruction manual in sight. I'm Owen Pike, a quiet systems analyst who moved to Birch Ridge 3 years ago to garden heirloom tomatoes, read military history books, and mind my mailbox like it's the last neutral zone on Earth. I work from home, I pay my dues on time, and I've never once complained about anyone's lawn ornaments, even the neighbor with 17 plastic flamingos arranged in what appears to be a ritualistic circle. The HOA is ruled with an iron fist by Belinda Crowe, a woman who keeps bylaws in color-coded sheet protectors and actually says per my previous email in real-life conversations at the grocery store. She's the type who sends meeting minutes in size 8 font to save paper but prints them on cardstock for importance. She hates that our grass is a native meadow approved by the State Conservation Department, and that I refuse to attend her monthly patio wine and compliance night where she reads violations over Chardonnay. Belinda calls my wife's deployment duffels aggressively utilitarian with a sneer in her voice that could curdle milk. I call them not her business, which apparently was the wrong answer. Belinda started her campaign against us small with fines for outdoor reading after dusk, claiming my booklight constituted an unapproved exterior illumination device. Then came accusations that our rain barrel was a mosquito magnet with boundary issues because it sat 2 inches over the invisible property line she measured with a yardstick at 6 in the morning. She once sent a certified letter complaining that our doormat's welcome message wasn't welcoming enough and created a hostile entrance environment. Then came the glossy flyers in every mailbox announcing a neighborhood safety initiative HOA community patrol, complete with stock photo soldiers who were clearly models holding airsoft rifles and a logo that looked like a sheriff's star drawn by a raccoon with artistic ambitions. The flyer promised enhanced community vigilance and rapid response to landscaping violations. Soon, middle-aged men in tactical skirts and fishing vests modified with Velcro patches began lurking by hedges with clipboards, writing citations for crimes like unapproved wind chime tonality and excessive bird feeder capacity. The situation escalated when they started wearing body cameras that were actually GoPros duct-taped to bicycle helmets. They'd patrol in formation, 3 across, walking so slowly that joggers had to run around them into the street. They carried walkie-talkies that squealed feedback every 30 seconds and referred to each house by code names like Tango Garden Gnome and Bravo Unmowed Sector. Todd, their self-appointed captain, was a retired middle manager who'd watched too many police procedurals and believed zip ties were the solution to every problem. He'd practiced his command voice in the mirror, you could tell, but it still came out like he was asking permission rather than giving orders. One humid Thursday night, Todd rapped on our door with what he called his compliance knock, which was just regular knocking but more annoying. He demanded with false authority to inspect for contraband fencing that he claimed he could see from the street. Mara, fresh from a 12-hour shift at the base, asked which specific statute with a calm professional tone that should have been his first warning. Todd pulled out a laminated card and said with the confidence of the deeply incorrect, all of them, particularly subsection J regarding unauthorized perimeter modifications. There is no subsection J. Belinda hovered at the curb like a vulture in yoga pants, recording on an iPad the way tourists film sunsets, aggressively and with their index fingers while squinting at the screen. She narrated into the tablet saying things like subject appears non-compliant and preparing for escalation protocol. When we politely but firmly refused entry, Belinda announced with dramatic flair that the HOA had upgraded to Enforcement Level 2 and would execute a compliance warrant within 24 hours. I made the mistake of laughing. Not a small chuckle but a full belly laugh at the absurdity of an HOA compliance warrant. Belinda's face turned the color of an overripe tomato, and she speed-walked back to her house in her special enforcement fleece vest that had HOA President embroidered in gold thread. I thought that was the end of it. Just another bizarre Belinda moment to add to the collection. I was spectacularly wrong. The next evening at exactly 7:30, For officers rolled up in 2 golf carts they'd modified with toy light bars from a police costume kit and sirens that played 3 different tones, none of them official. They wore airsoft plate carriers over polo shirts, utility belts loaded with zip ties, multiple flashlights, and enough Sharpies to stock an office supply store. Todd had added sergeant stripes to his shoulders with electrical tape. Another guy, Phil from 3 houses down, who I'd previously only seen walking his anxious Pomeranian, wore a helmet with HOA SWAT written in Sharpie. They shouted about HOA Tactical Response Team and demanded immediate compliance with the warrant. That's when Todd pulled out his baton, one of those expandable ones you can buy at any martial arts store, and decided to demonstrate his authority on my shinbone. The crack was audible from 20 feet away. I went down hard on my own driveway, gravel embedding in my palms as I tried to catch myself. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, like someone had replaced my leg bone with molten metal. I heard Phil say with nervous energy, "Did you actually just do that, Todd?" Todd replied with diminishing confidence. He was resisting a lawful HOA action. That's when my front door opened. Mara moved like a switch, flipping from relaxed to lethal, her military training taking over before Todd could even retract his baton. She parried his second swing with our thick rubber welcome mat that read "Home Sweet Home," the irony not lost on anyone. She swept his ankle with a move so smooth it looked choreographed, and plucked his fake badge off his vest mid-fall. The badge, I noticed even through my pain, was a junior deputy sticker from a kid's police costume with HOA written over it in black marker. Another guy, Derek the accountant who lived 6 houses down, reached for zip ties hanging from his belt, but she relieved him of the ties, his vape that flew out of his shirt pocket, and his dignity in 4 seconds flat. She used his own momentum to spin him into our decorative garden boulder, where he sat down hard and decided to stay there. The tallest one, a guy named Marcus who taught spin classes at the local gym and thought his muscle mass meant something here, charged forward with misplaced confidence, yelling, "Stop resisting." Mara redirected him into our recycling bin with minimal effort, which announced his arrival with a proud metallic symphony of cans and bottles. He emerged covered in coffee grounds and orange juice residue, his tactical vest now decorated with eggshells. Phil, still wearing his homemade SWAT helmet, took 3 steps backward, tripped over Todd who was still on the ground, and landed in Belinda's prized rose bush, which he'd later try to add to the damages in court. Belinda shrieked with panic rising in her voice, "Assault! Assault on HOA officers! Citizens arrest!" She dialed 911 while shouting into the phone about armed homeowners attacking a lawful patrol, somehow forgetting to mention they'd just broken my leg. She kept repeating, "Send everyone. Send the SWAT team." The dispatcher, probably wondering what dimension they'd called from, asked her to clarify what she meant by HOA officers. Belinda screamed back, "The Homeowners Association Tactical Response Unit." Unfortunately for her, the first responders were actual police officers who knew the difference between real and pretend authority. They arrived to find me on the ground with a leg that looked like a parenthesis, Mara calmly applying a field splint with materials from her emergency kit, and 4 cosplay commandos in various states of defeat whining into their elbow pads. The lead officer, Sergeant Williams, took one look at Belinda's iPad footage, which she eagerly showed him thinking it was evidence in her favor, and said with a flat deadpan tone, "Ma'am, what exactly did you think you were allowed to do? Did you just show me video evidence of your group assaulting this man?" Belinda stammered with indignation, "We're the authorized HOA patrol. We have jurisdiction." Sergeant Williams looked at her for a long moment before saying, "Ma'am, HOAs can issue fines for grass height. They cannot break people's bones. That's just regular assault." Todd, still on the ground, tried to interject that I had been non-compliant with ordinances. Williams cut him off saying, "Sir, you're wearing a toy badge and you just committed aggravated assault with a weapon. Please stop talking." Turns out HOA Tactical had no legal standing, no authorization, and no permits. Just a PayPal account for buying their equipment, a Facebook group where they planned their raids, and matching morale patches that read compliance or chaos with a picture of a lawnmower crossed with a gavel. The officers collected their arsenal of pretend authority, including batons, toy badges, zip ties, and a binder labeled Operation Quiet Grass that contained detailed surveillance notes on every house in the neighborhood, rating them by compliance level with a complex color-coded system. They also collected Belinda's warrants, which were printed on certificate paper from the craft store and sealed with a gold embossed sticker she'd bought in bulk. One warrant had glitter on it, which Officer Martinez held up to the streetlight with visible confusion. The ambulance medic, who happened to live 2 streets over and had been warning people about this escalation for weeks, told the officers with exhausted familiarity that he'd warned Belinda this was nuts at the last community meeting. She'd responded by fining him for a political sign that was actually just a sign for his daughter's school bake sale. The officers took statements while Mara gave a succinct military-style debrief listing trespass, assault with a deadly weapon, impersonation of law enforcement, false imprisonment, and filing a false police report. She used precise military terminology that made the real officers nod with respect while the fake ones looked increasingly pale. Then Detective Ramirez arrived, a man who looked like he'd seen everything and was still somehow disappointed by this. He was deadpan and done with everyone before he even got out of his car. He asked Belinda who authorized uniforms, badges, and emergency lights. She said with diminishing confidence, "The board voted on it unanimously." He asked who is the board. She replied, trying to sound official, "Me and 2 alternates who couldn't be here tonight." He pressed further with the patience of someone who already knew the answer, asking who are the alternates. She whispered barely audibly while looking at her shoes, "Also me. I registered under different positions." The detective then asked Todd where he got his law enforcement training. Todd mumbled something about YouTube videos and a weekend seminar at a mall. Phil claimed he'd been a hall monitor in middle school, which he seemed to think was relevant experience. Derek just asked repeatedly if he could call his wife, who it turned out had no idea he'd been playing pretend cop for the last 3 months and thought he was at bowling league. 2 weeks later, after my surgery involving metal pins and a recovery time of 3 months, and after a very satisfying round of depositions where Belinda tried to claim sovereign citizen status for the HOA, the county held a public meeting. Detective Ramirez unveiled a PowerPoint presentation titled Faux Authority, When Suburban Governance Goes Wrong, featuring Belinda's emails about escalation protocols, dynamic entry for non-compliant horticulture, and something called Operation Dandelion Storm. The presentation included receipts showing she'd spent $16,000 of HOA funds on airsoft gear, light bars that weren't street legal even on real police cars, and incredibly, tactical clipboard holsters that attached to their belts. The room gasped audibly when the next slide showed an email Belinda sent to the patrol stating, "If they resist, apply calibrated discomfort to achieve compliance. Remember, we are the thin beige line between order and chaos." Another email detailed plans to purchase a drone for aerial surveillance of backyard violations and possibly tear gas for what she called extreme non-compliance events. She'd even tried to register the HOA Patrol as an official security company but was rejected when she listed their primary service as grass height enforcement. The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Chen who looked like she was trying not to laugh, presented evidence that Belinda had been planning this for 2 years. She'd attended multiple citizen police academies in neighboring counties, failing each one, and had been banned from a police supply store for asking too many questions about grenades. She'd created a 130-page manual for HOA enforcement that referenced laws that didn't exist and cited episodes of Cops as legal precedent. Charges landed on Belinda like hail in a thunderstorm. Impersonating an officer, conspiracy to commit assault, aggravated assault causing grievous bodily harm, misuse of HOA funds, false imprisonment, criminal harassment, filing a false police report, and somehow, tax evasion because she'd written off the tactical gear as a business expense. Todd and the other officers pled guilty almost immediately, flipping on Belinda faster than pancakes at a church breakfast and handing over everything including the group chat named #WarOnWeeds and a secondary chat called Code Green Grass Force where they'd rated houses by threat level. Todd provided screenshots of Belinda's messages instructing them to make an example of someone to establish authority. Phil surrendered his helmet cam footage, which mostly showed him heavy breathing and occasionally narrating like he was in an action movie. Derek turned over spreadsheets where Belinda had tracked violations going back 5 years with a scoring system that determined enforcement priority. My house was marked in red as a Priority 1 compliance target due to what she called persistent horticultural rebellion. The judge, Honorable Margaret Foster, issued a protective order that banned Belinda from approaching my property, my mailbox, my vehicles, or any mobility aid used by the victim. Yes, my crutches got legal bodyguards, and she couldn't come within 50 feet of my wheelchair during recovery. The judge also banned her from owning walkies-talkies, police scanners, or any clothing with the word tactical on it. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically over 3 hours. The fake badges alone carried up to 5 years in federal prison for impersonating federal officers since Belinda had claimed her authority derived from interstate commerce laws. The assault conspiracy added another 10 years. Misuse of HOA funds brought fraud charges worth $20,000 in fines. The aggravated assault causing actual bodily harm was worth 15 years. The judge reviewed each count with growing incredulity, occasionally removing her glasses to rub her temples. She asked Belinda if she understood that impersonating law enforcement was a federal offense that real officers had died protecting. Belinda stammered something about community standards and keeping property values high. When the verdict came down after a 2-day trial where Belinda tried to represent herself and cited Harry Potter fan fiction as legal precedent, the courtroom fell completely silent. Belinda Crowe was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison with no possibility of early release, 3 years supervised release where she couldn't join any organization with the word association in it, and ordered to pay $47,000 in restitution covering my medical bills, legal fees, lost wages from 3 months of recovery, and pain and suffering. The judge also mandated 2,000 hours of community service, specifically directing traffic at real police training drills under strict supervision while wearing a vest that said "I am not a cop" in reflective letters. But the crown jewel of her sentence was enrollment in a special impersonation awareness program, which meant spending 8 consecutive Saturdays in a classroom learning the difference between actual law enforcement and whatever she thought she was doing. The HOA board position she'd held for 12 years with an iron grip was stripped immediately and permanently. Her real estate license, which she'd leveraged to intimidate new homeowners into compliance by suggesting their mortgages could be affected by HOA violations, was suspended pending review by the state board with likely permanent revocation. The judge then added something unprecedented. She ordered Belinda to personally apologize to every household in the neighborhood in writing, with each letter approved by the court. She had to attend monthly counseling for power addiction and complete a course on the actual legal limits of HOA authority. She was banned from using the internet to research anything related to law enforcement, tactical gear, or citizen arrests. Her computer would be monitored for 5 years. Belinda's face went from red to white to a shade of green I'd only seen on expired lunch meat left in the sun. She gripped the defendant's table so hard her knuckles turned white as the judge read each consequence with deliberate clarity. When he mentioned the federal prison term, she made a sound like air leaving a punctured tire. Her attorney, a public defender who tried to convince her to take a plea deal, whispered urgently in her ear about appeals, but she just stared at the judge repeating the number 18 months over and over in a voice that grew smaller with each repetition until it was barely a whisper, her dreams of suburban authority crumbling into federal conviction.